Well, wonderful news. Your daughter just had a baby, but she tells you that it's a they-be, Theyby, pronounced they-be. My interview with Diamond and Silk, they visit Think America. We'll have it. And a Bloomberg story reporting on how a Chinese computer manufacturer secretly installed a spy chip on motherboards. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg, your host. This is America's radio town hall. I invite two everyday Americans to come on the program and chew on thought-provoking conversation starters. I present them various interesting dilemmas and news articles and situations, and they let their hair down and let us know, let America know what they think. Welcome to the program to Scott. He is an insurance investigator for fraud. Nice to have you, Scott. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it.
All right. And our other guest is Dick. Dick is a retired pilot. Nice to have you, Dick.
Good to be here, Terry.
Let's get right started. I'll go to you first, Dick. There is a new angle on all this Me Too stuff. We are now at the 1 year mark of the Me Too movement. Its impact is easy to ascertain in all of the powerful men that have been brought down with revelations of their sexual misconduct, like Matt Lauer and Les Moonves, Charlie Rose, the most famous one, Harvey Weinstein. But there is confusion, I would say, in the workplace about proper etiquette. And there is also, paradoxically, the possibility of future opportunities for women, as it turns out. Male executives are now starting to report that they are struggling to adjust to the new rules of engagement, and therefore they might not think it's worth it to hire women anyway. All right, Dick, to you first. Your thoughts on some of the fallout, and I don't just mean the due process, because there's many cases, and some of these cases are being worked through the courts for due process. I'm talking about the workplace itself, confusion with etiquette. Let's start with you, Dick.
It would certainly give me a lot of reason to pause before hiring a woman. Unfortunately, when I hired, I always hired the best people regardless of who they were or what they looked like or anything else. But now you just never know. It might be somebody sitting looking to cause a problem. And unfortunately, it's something that has to be in the back of your mind nowadays. What could happen if? I would certainly make a policy that no employee is allowed to date another employee at the company, or you leave. One of you leaves. I would not.
So you would fall in the category that some experts are saying. They are saying there is now a blooming category, an increase in reluctance from men in those positions of authority when they would hire or work closely with women as well. In some cases, they would decline to hold one-on-one meetings with female employees. They don't think it's worth the trouble now. Would you fall into that category? Because experts are starting to look at this very closely now that we're at the 1 year mark.
You'd have to be foolish not to think about that. And I would never have a one-on-one with a female employee. There always have to be more people in the room. You just don't know what they're going to do, what somebody's going to do.
Would you go so far to say that this is a boomerang against feminists?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you elaborate on that?
Well, basically, they kept saying, we want equal opportunity, but we don't want you to act like a normal person. We want you to do it our way, only our way, and it's going to go back on them. It's going to cause less opportunity for women because they become so strident in what they're doing.
All right. Interesting. Scott, the Me Too movement was supposed to clean up workplace harassment. It was specifically designed for the problems in the workplace. This was supposed to be the social call, the sea change, if you would, with regard to what's been happening for years in the workplace. I would guess probably since the 70s, early 70s, when more and more women started to come into the workplace. And yet, is the way it's doing so in not hiring women, especially now, especially attractive ones, a boomerang in your view as well?
Well, it certainly is a boomerang. However, I'm 35, and this movement started when I was a kid. It was just more benign about it, and it was take your daughter to work day. And in growing up, I noticed I better be careful around girls because they can say something and I can get my name dragged through the mud, even though nothing may end up happening ultimately through a legal situation. This Me Too movement actually started in Hollywood to clean up Hollywood, but then they realized it was going to expose liberal men. And so they had to evolve it into the rest of the world. And they used it then as an opportunity to take down enemies. This whole Me Too movement to me is a slap in the face to good women. It's a slap in the face to true victims. And it's a slap in the face to common sense, intelligent members of society. And they want to tell us that reality isn't reality and that they are correct in their twisted, warped interpretation of this. I could go on about this thing in so many different angles and so many different paths. To me Too is just disgusting. And whatever people think it's for, it's not.
Human resource professionals, Scott, say that Me Too has increased awareness of harassment. I think you would agree that's probably a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Made it easier for victims, both male and female, mostly female, to come forward and to report offensive behavior. It has prompted enhanced employee training and awareness, especially with larger corporations. So what's wrong with that?
But offensive behavior is completely subjective. I think it's offensive when I hear liberals talking about Kavanaugh and speaking bad about him, but I don't go cry about it to HR. Offensive behavior is subjective, and we're allowing people to take the subjective and turn it into objective.
Well, you might be right on the subjective because in the workplace, every workplace is different, but there isn't a through line of behavior that people actually adhere to because workplaces are different from workplace to workplace. And yet perhaps there should be. There should be common courtesy. There should be manners. There should be keeping your eye on the job and not the cute girl down in the cubby down the way, this kind of thing. And it's just not happening. So maybe, Dick, we need a Me Too movement to at least bring awareness to this, especially now that women are more and more in the marketplace, so that there is a new norm. What is necessary in the workplace? What is appropriate in the workplace? New manners. You know, if you're going to throw out the manners from the 1940s and the 1950s, then what are the new manners, Dick?
You know, basically, it still remains to be seen. The catch is, while this brings out the idea that the knowledge that there has been harassment, there have been wrong things done, women are not above using that same threat of charges being brought against you to get something they haven't earned. A lot of guys have been charged with things because they wouldn't give a woman what she wanted in the job. Everybody forget about the Duke lacrosse scandal and all that happened with those guys who did nothing. Women know now they have the power to falsely accuse somebody, and that's caused another problem for the whole thing.
It is a problem because there isn't due process. First of all, it's true of college campuses as well. You are assumed guilty in the workplace before you even manage to get into HR, it seems, or much less a court of law. It is so I think there needs to be a real establishment as we move forward with this sea change, because I do think it's a sea change that's going on, as to what is harassment in the first place. And here's what I mean by that, Dick. It seems to me that the corporations or even small businesses have never really defined harassment. There isn't this manual that HR, whether you're a small business or a large corporation, gives to every employee. And we don't have the government necessarily saying that with the private sector. So what is harassment? I always thought it was multiple times that someone wants your attention for sex, for something else, but it is that constant knock at your door when you don't want it. But in the Me Too movement, my goodness, you can elbow somebody in an elevator just getting into the elevator. I was like, you're harassing me. It is so blown out of proportion. Don't you think there needs to be a definition, Dick, to you first on this, about what is harassing in the first place?
There sure
and how
should be.
much of it is harassing?
They sure should be. The problem is the radical feminists say it's anything a woman wants it to be at any given time, and nobody has to tell you what it is. And HR departments would just soon cut the man loose rather than fight it.
Scott?
So don't we already have laws about harassment and sexual harassment and all of that? It's already defined legally. There are laws, there are ordinances. Why do we have to try to get tricky here and get cute about it? Let's just take the law.
Well, there are with the federal government. There is with state government. There are laws with municipalities, but there's not necessarily laws in the private sector. And if the quote unquote law is supposed to be defined in an HR handbook, that's not the same from business to government.
I'm sorry. I think it's being made way too difficult and way too tricky. If the law defines it, then as an HR person, as a company, I'm going to say my company is going to operate within the law. And this is how we view it, just like the law views it.
But there isn't. But the point is, the law is, when you say the law, there isn't the law. It's not the 10 commandments that comes down to everyone in the United States. It doesn't work like that. It depends on who you're working for, what municipality, what state government, whomever you're working for, and how the policy, which is the better word, is defined within that company. And this is murky. Last word back to you, Dick.
There have to be some standards set, and there have to be some rulings made somewhere. Somebody has to come to some senses about this, because until it is, everything's going to be in turmoil.
Well, I'm with you, Dick, in the sense that harassing can mean, it seems, with this new sea change that's among us, that can mean whatever the so-called victim wants it to mean. And that needs to be tightened up and really defined so that people know in the workplace what's expected of them, when to bring a charge or a complaint, et cetera, to HR or the boss.
Define what a victim is. That way, all of the people can understand if they are a victim or not.
If there's a harasser, then there is an assumed victim. Good discussion, guys. Very good. And we are in the early stages, I suspect, of this sea change, even though we're at the 1 year mark. Straight ahead, we'll talk about what they be, yes, pronounced they be, with a newborn baby. I'm Terry Gilberg. Find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio. Subscribe to our podcast, thinkamericaradio.com. Welcome back to Think America. Let's say you get wonderful news that your daughter just had a baby. You can't wait to hear if it's a boy or a girl, but your daughter says the baby is a they be, Theyby, pronounced they be. Parents have decided to raise the they be without the construct of gender so that the child can choose its sex when the time comes. Now, this is not a big movement like the Me Too movement that we talked about, a sea change. The folks that are doing this, the parents that are doing this, as social scientists tell us that they are part of a small but a strong-minded group of parents who have chosen to raise their babies, that is, in early childhood without gender, because they think that would cast them as male or female against the possibility that as the child grows, the child does not want to be male or female, giving the child ergo time to make up its own mind. I hope I'm saying that right, with the appropriate pronouns to get the story described. Scott, your thoughts on this?
Let's just tell them science doesn't exist and that numbers really don't equal 4. Let's just go ahead and start telling them everything that is real and normal and just obvious is not. Because that's what these people are doing. They're not strong-minded. They're stupid sheep. Really, you're going to now be told how to parent your child. Do they not think for themselves? Do they not? Kids have this natural ability, and I love it because it makes adults look stupid all the time. They know right from wrong. They know what's normal and what's not. And they identify it and say, that's not normal. They see a guy walking in a dress and go, that's not normal. So these parents, I love it because in 18 to 20 years, these kids are going to start realizing what normal human beings realize, and that is that their parents and liberals are dumb, and they're going to rebel against them, and we're going to see this continued conservative rebellion from the youth. The hippies are dying quickly, and that's why they're doing all that they're doing right now in D.C. and in public and everywhere, and in Portland and Antifa and redirecting traffic. These morons are dying real quick, and this is what happens when you're trapped and you're dying. You just do whatever you can to survive, and it's going to be nice. It's going to be nice.
All right. To your point, Dick, are they dying? To be sure, these parents are a small group. They've decided to raise the baby without the construct of gender. They want the child to have its own opinion on gender. Do you think that's poor parenting? Or is it giving the courtesy to the offspring to make up its own mind?
Well, they're in deep need of psychiatric care. There is only 2 sexes, male and female, and they are actually harming the child. They're going to raise them like this. The kids are going to be in school, are going to be ridiculed. They're just a bunch of wackos looking for attention, is what it boils down to. They have no compass in life. They're fruitcakes, and I don't know what else to say. These people are nuts.
What this means is that not only do the children not know their assigned sex until maybe they're in kindergarten and the little boy sitting next to Billy says, you're a boy. And his little classmate tells him, you're a boy, whether you know it or not. But for the sake of argument, it means that they don't know their assigned sex and no one else will either. Not the friends, the acquaintances, the fellow employees, the family, including the grandparents. That would be an official assigned sex. So the children who are naturally aware, of course, of their own body parts and might find out for sure that they're a boy at school or a girl at school, they are given the freedom to be a they be. And that little Billy who's told you're a boy, he might come back to little Johnny across the aisle there and say, no, I'm not. I'm a they be. Let me phrase it this way. Is biology going to be dead? Because parents aren't following biology, Scott.
No, biology won't be dead. Common sense is coming back. Logic is coming back. Reason is coming back. We're just going through some Twilight Zone times right now, but every little benchmark moment, we are seeing that logic is winning, that common sense is winning. I'm trying to keep myself calm right now because these are things where when you give them time and you give them a discussion about it, it gives them some sort of credibility. And these things are not credible. I will fight society tooth and nail on these things. I'm not going to be told that science is wrong. First, they didn't like God. Then it was all science. Now they're saying science is wrong and we can play Frankenstein with you and make you all kinds of freaks. No, it's not. And if you want to take this to society, I'm ready to be your Huckleberry. I'm sick of letting these liberals have these discussions and trying to play with our thoughts. Well, think about it. Think of it. I did, idiot. You're an idiot. I'm done talking to you.
All right. Last word quickly. Last word quickly, Dick.
Yeah, these people are part of a bunch. They're a group that they see liberalism being cut off at the knees at every place that's actually thought about and there's a discussion about, and they have to come up with something new to justify what they do.
Well, yeah, and no one else is going to ever change the diaper of that child.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the babies, I agree with Scott, will die out. Parents just simply not following. Find us at thinkamericaradio.com for our podcast. Find me, Terry Talk Radio, on Facebook. Back with more after this. Welcome back to Think America. Recently, I was in Washington, D.C. during the Kavanaugh chaos, but got a breather from all of that when I met the internet dynamic duo Diamond and Silk. Here is my interview with them. I'm delighted to have Diamond and Silk on Think America with Terry Gilberg. This is a real treat. Hi, Diamond.
Hi.
Hi, Silk.
Hi, darling. How are you doing?
This is really fun to be in Washington, D.C. interviewing you guys. I understand you come from North Carolina, and you've been a YouTube sensation for many years. How many?
I think the sensation came out the June of 2015 when the president was announcing that he was running for president.
That's right.
So it just all snowballed until what you see today.
And you were Democrats originally.
We were lifelong
Democrats.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
Well, we found that just because you black, it didn't mean you had to vote Democrat.
That's right.
When did you have your cacophony of voices that came down from above and said, you're Republican?
It was an awakening. My sister was looking at Donald coming down the escalators, and what she did is she called me, and she told me that Donald Trump is announcing that he's running for president. And I said, oh, my God. I called her back, and I said, girl, this is going to be the next president of the United States. And it was about what he said. It's like he had the solutions to the issues and to the problems that was plaguing this country. He had answers for that. You know, when I look on the corners and I saw a lot of black boys and men on the corner and nobody able to work. Everybody was stagnated. It just didn't make sense to me. So whenever Donald Trump was saying, you know, I'm going to bring back jobs, I'm like, you know, you have to be an idiot to send jobs overseas and not allow the people right here in America to work those jobs.
Now, were you, Silk, pro-Obama at the time during those 8 years, and then you had this metamorphosis?
I was never
asleep. It wasn't about being pro-Obama because we were conditioned in the mind that you vote for whoever the head of the ticket was.
That's how it was. You vote for whoever the head of the ticket. We did not like Obama policies at all, but we voted because we were taught if you don't vote, you don't have a voice.
That's right.
So whoever the head of the ticket, you vote. But when this time came around, we was like, oh, wait a minute. We're not voting based on party. We're voting based on the person who is going to do the job.
That's right.
And it happened to be a Republican, a businessman. We loved everything he was talking about, and that's why we voted for him.
Exactly.
All right. So what pushback originally when you said, well, I'm not voting for Hillary. Yes. I'm going to vote for this man named Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I don't know what pushback that we got because we really didn't pay it no attention. Now, I can tell you when we met him back in December 2015, and he put us on his stage in front of all of those cameras, we had so many black people calling us coons, Uncle Tom, Nacho Mama, Bahama Mama, all kinds of names. But
nasty.
Now that we had their attention, we was able to talk and let them know we can no longer vote for a system that keeps handing us crumbs.
That's right.
We needed somebody to show us how to make our own crumb cake. Now we don't get a whole bunch of blowback from black people. They're like, you know what, I'm on the Trump train. I see exactly what's going on. People are excited. People want to work. People want to thrive.
You're a leader.
That's why they are trying to silence us on these social media platforms. See, that's where we got our start. And if you notice, people after us, we was in the revolution. We have the battle scars to prove it.
That's right.
What you see now is people in the evolution. They are evolving because now you see them making videos. And some of these people didn't even vote for President Trump, but now they're like, oh, I like the guy.
They're jumping on the train.
They are jumping on the train.
Right.
But see, people want to live better lives. They're tired of this foolishness, this bickering, this talking about Russia, talking about porn stars, talking about a salacious gossip book, talking about Omarosa. They're tired of it. Listen, I want a good job so that I can take and I can feed my family.
That's right.
I can raise my children. Thank you for the justice reform, Mr. President. So when one of my family members get out of jail, you're giving them a second chance. This is what black Americans like. But see, Obama was supposed to be the first black president. He didn't do anything like that. He worked for Hollywood. They were the puppet masters and he was the puppet and they were pulling his strings. He didn't work for the average American person. And see, they get mad at President Trump. President Trump paid attention. attention. He listened. He listened to the voices of the
American people. And now look at black unemployment.
What? At an all-time low, the lowest.
Isn't that fabulous?
And I'm glad that he taught his numbers. That's right. Taught your numbers and let people see what you've done. Because they want to give the credit to Obama. Obama didn't do not one thing for the African-American community. I'm sorry, black community, because we ain't never been to Africa. So we ain't African-American. We black Americans.
That's right.
Or we just Americans.
That's right.
All right, let me ask you this now. President Trump, in my view, seems to be, as the saying goes, taking these cuts from 1,000 paper cuts, right? Taking the hits, or more like 1,000 darts, right? And he's still standing.
Yes.
He's got resilience.
Oh,
he's got
tenacious.
Tenacious.
He is tenacious.
He's got backbone.
Yeah.
How do you think all of this is going to play out as they continue to throw darts at him?
Yeah, well, that's why he's rough around the edges. He can take all of that, baby. So you cut him, he's going to cut you right on back. And that's what people need to understand. Remember, he is not a career, well-dressed, rehearsed politician.
Exactly.
What he is a well-dressed businessman. He's about taking care of the business at hand, and that's what he's about doing. You have all of these career politicians that give us a bill of lies, a bill of promises, and go back on each and every one of them whenever they get in office. You don't hear from them, you don't see them no more until it's time for another election. President Trump is doing something. He's going against the status quo, is what he is doing. And he's showing everybody, look, if I can do this, so can you. You have the black community. You have the black man. We are accustomed to going to church. And with us being in church, you're being taught that as a black man, you're the head of your house, meaning you're supposed to be the provider for your home. How, as a black man, Mr. Obama, as a black man, would you not allow other black men the opportunity to provide for their own home by sending jobs overseas? Do that make sense?
Let me address something. Nike, NFL, Colin Kaepernick.
Why would you want to honor somebody that wants to disrespect our flag? And you want to talk about oppression in the black community, but you're disrespecting the men and women that went out and fought for your rights, baby. How are you going to be okay with honoring something or someone like that? If you want to protest something, look at Chicago. Go protest there in Chicago. Don't protest the flag. If you don't want to stand for the flag, you will be kneeling in the unemployment line.
That's right. It's going to be very hard for people to support Nike if Nike have him as the face.
And yet people say this is a great business decision.
Kaepernick, what he needs to do is come out and apologize for the way he's behaved when it comes to the flag, and let people know I'm going down there to Chicago to talk to my black brothers and sisters that's killing up each other.
That's right.
That they're going to have to stop. I'm going to kneel in protest of that instead of kneeling on our flag.
Switching the subject just a little bit, do you think President Trump should help in any way by sending any kind of military into Chicago to stop the violence, particularly on the weekend? Rahm Emanuel has already said he's not running anymore. He can't handle it. It's over his head. It's over his pay grade, probably.
Well, the first thing that I want the president to do, send in somebody from the FBI that's not biased. Send them in there and have this whole fiasco investigated.
That's right.
Because somebody have to be getting a kickback, patty whack, give a good dog a bone to look the other way.
You think?
With this level of violence and drugs pouring in the city, and people are fighting in this drug turf war that's going on.
It's constant.
Absolutely. Somebody is getting paid to turn a blind eye. And then send in the National Guard.
That's
absolutely. Right. This is not white officers killing black men. This is black on black crime. Yeah. Where are the black leaders? Where are the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jackson?
Well, where are the churches?
Where are the churches?
Where are
they
the churches?
can stand up in Aretha Franklin funeral and throw daggers at a sitting president. But you would think they would be down there in Chicago to say, hey, boys, stop this here.
All right. So where are we going in the midterms, ladies?
Listen, I think that we're going to do really well in these congressional races.
You do? You don't think it's going to be close?
I don't think, no, and I don't think it's going to be no blue wave. The only blue wave that I see is Democrats waving goodbye to the Democratic Party because they're tired of their antics.
Well, there's no platform.
There is no platform unless it's about socialists and social...
it's resist, abolish ICE, I hate Trump.
I mean,
it's so negative.
It's very negative. They're leaning so far to the left that they're falling over a cliff. So, no, I think that we're going to do okay. But here's the deal. We don't need to get comfortable now. What we need to do is make sure we go vote.
Have to go vote.
Vote right so that you won't get left. You're going to have to vote Republican and vote for people that have our president agenda at heart.
Final thoughts.
Get out and vote. Vote right so you won't get left. Get out and vote. This is the most important election of our lifetime.
That's right.
This is the most important election of our lifetime. If you still want money in your pocket, if you still want to thrive in this country, if you still want President Trump running this country, get out and vote in these congressional races.
And don't forget that your voice is your power. So you're going to have to get off of your behind and go use it.
Ooh.
Go vote.
Great to have you both on. Diamond and Silk, happy to have them on the program. When we come back, we'll hear what Terry's Townhall talkers have to say. You're listening to Think America, thinkamericaradio.com. Welcome back to Think America. That was really fun having the internet duo Diamond and Silk on board, paying a visit to the show when I was in Washington. Scott, your thoughts?
I loved it. And you know what? If I'm President Trump, I'm bringing those ladies into my campaign, out with Omarosa, in with the real black women, and I'm going to even do a TV interview, town hall style thing on a Sunday evening for all of America to see with those two. And
it would be very entertaining. I can
would
tell
just
you that.
chat with them and let Black America tune in to those two wonderful women.
I would also maybe add, he could add Kanye, right, Dick?
Absolutely. He'd hire them and send them out doing their own campaigns. They would fill the stadiums.
All right, let's move on. A Bloomberg story reports on how a major Chinese computer manufacturer had secretly installed, hold on to your seat for this, a spy chip. The spy chip was apparently on motherboards of computers installed into the data centers of several major U.S. companies, including a popular consumer products company, as well as a major cloud vendor, and even got into the motherboard at the Department of Defense. I don't know which motherboard or in what area or sub-department of the Department of Defense, but according to the report, and Bloomberg stands by their reporting, this allowed the Chinese government to secretly spy on them. Now, the Chinese government, of course, denies the story. Bloomberg stands by their reporting, and they actually point out that a single country has now the ability to compromise everything from our web-connected toasters to our cell phone core servers and even to our defense. Scott, you do investigations, so what should our country's response be to this, if anything?
Bring the jobs back home. Bring American industries for technology. Keep them in-house. Bill Clinton sold the nukes to North Korea in the 90s. We got this pact with the international countries to do business and what have you. We asked them to bring the Trojan horse into us. We knew that China didn't view us as an ally, and yet we were allowing them to manufacture all of the electronic devices, or essentially all of them. The writing's on the wall, and it was real simple to figure it out if you're paying attention. This was a long time in progress, and I'm sure they've been stealing things from us for many, many years.
Dick, one of the things that's always talked about is how China really is doing capitalism under the umbrella of communism. Do you think with something like this, to Scott's point of bringing jobs home or trying to get more free markets and to heck with all this turf warfare that's going on, China could ever become more free market oriented and the Communist Party will eventually dissolve?
I don't think it's going to ever be that way. It's not in their culture. This communism has been ingrained into them for so long. But what also gets me is, how did they get this in? Didn't our techies bother to check anything? Are they that good that they can sneak it by us and our guys are too stupid to look through these boards and find out?
Part of the answer to that is what actually this chip looks like. It is smaller than a piece of rice. It is it came through Elemental made software. Elemental is the name of a company for compressing massive video files, not only for the organizations that I just described, but also for Amazon, Prime Video, for Apple. There was even some talk, could it have gotten into the CIA, Dick?
It may well have. I know the Chinese have been our enemy for a very long time, and we had to have suspected, somebody had to have suspected that something might be up somewhere along the line, and you just don't completely trust them. We should have done whatever we had to. I mean, if they're that much better than us, then we're in serious trouble. That we couldn't find
Well, they also are manufacturing, what is it, 90% of all phones, 70% of all computers, something like that. So they've got the whole ball of wax.
That's right.
Scott.
Well, Elemental, where are they based? Oh, Portland. Okay. Well, maybe there's something more to that. Maybe the spy came from Dianne Feinstein's driver. Not too sure. But no, this is just, I mean, as Dick said, our government failed. And I'm not sure if they failed or not, because what we're watching unfold and, there's a lot of alliance with Soros and the Democrats and an international one world coalition that these liberals like to have. It's very concerning, and I can go very deep and dark, and I hope the American people...
Well, we don't have more time for it. Let's find out what Megan has to say. She will be on the program next after this quick break on this very disturbing story. Bloomberg, because they're standing by it, I think they're accurate on the story. You can read about it. Megan is up next, Megan Porth, and she'll comment. Megan Porth has joined the show, as she does at the tail end of all of our shows. She's a contributor to Think America. And Megan, we were talking with Terry's Townhall talkers about the really big Bloomberg story that broke just this past week on how a major Chinese manufacturer, a computer manufacturer, had secretly installed a hidden spy chip on motherboards of computers installed into data centers of many, many U.S. companies. And this leads me to say that, and Bloomberg article pointed it out, a single country now has the ability to compromise everything from our web-connected toasters, I said earlier, to our cell phones. And part of that is that they manufacture everything.
Oh, 100%. It's funny because probably many of the libertarians who are listening on the line are going, well, yeah, we already knew all of this. This is when I get to take my tinfoil hat off, Terry. And everybody says, oh, maybe she was right when she was saying that there are surreptitious ways that other countries, including and even our own country, our own government, are spying on on American people. And here is the problem that we have right now is that a lot of contracts are being sold to China and to Russia. And this has been happening for quite some time. I don't necessarily have an issue with that as far as free trade is concerned, but we're just kind of handing these things over. And these are layers upon layers of government contracts. So, the government contracts with one individual who then contracts with 5 or 6 different other individuals. Everyone knows what's happening as far as this is going here, this is going there, but we aren't able to necessarily track it as the public is concerned. So it wasn't until later that we all learned that actually, even though this was a San Francisco-based company and they were in California, that a lot of the manufacturing was actually being done in China. Now, obviously, that's probably a given for most people, considering most of our electronics are being manufactured over there. But the fact that they were able to infiltrate many of our government agencies through this is really disturbing. And this is why we need a lot more transparency as far as what is happening with our government contracts. I'm not a nationalist at all, but I don't think it's a bad idea for there to be provisions within government contracts that talk about working with American companies. And there are special programs that work with American companies, veteran-owned companies, small businesses, female-owned companies. But then we need to have audit rights, and that information needs to be public. Who is manufacturing every single element of this program or of this product that's being used in American government contracts? on the public side, there's not much more that we can do, to be honest with you, and not much more that I want to do. This is something that can be settled through the court system. If we find out that there was there is actually spy bot hardware that's on many of our systems or many of our hardware, then we actually get to sue these companies in trial. And this is the best place to vet these things out. I don't want the government passing regulation when it comes to private entities, unless, of course, it's in a government contract basis, because that's public money.
Well, you raise a good point that it is both happening in private sector and with our U.S. Department of Defense. There was some fallout from this story that says they probably infiltrated into the CIA as well. So let me take our conversation, Megan, into, and we're down to about 2 minutes, quickly into this area. Since we are in a difficult trade exchange with tariffs imposed between China and the United States, should anything be done about this story anyway?
My guess is on the government level that nothing's going to be done, because the U.S. government is probably doing the same thing somewhere else. So I don't think that they are going to point a finger, because there are going to be three fingers pointing right back at them.
All right. What you got in Change Your Life Technology?
This segment is brought to you by Your Contract Shop. And we're actually talking about hearing aids, Terry, which is so wonderful, because I don't know if you know this, hearing aids are exorbitantly expensive. Well, a new company, Bose, not a new company, sorry, Bose has been around for a long time, but they've just been approved by the FDA to produce the first over-the-counter hearing aid. And it's going to be about a third of the cost of a normal hearing aid. So I can't wait for this one to happen. And I'm sure there will be other competitors coming up and dropping the price even more.
Wonderful. Does it have a name yet, or just look for it when it's over the counter through Bose?
It doesn't have a name yet, but it's the well, they call it the Bose hearing aid, but I'm sure it'll have some sexy name once they release it from the FDA.
And I hope it's really sexy too, and you can't even tell that it's there.
Yeah, so like it's attractive or something.
Yes. All right. Well, that sounds wonderful. I'm sure they'll make a lot of money, and FDA approved. What's not to like? Because you got to always get their approval. So good. That's a very good, interesting Change Your Life Technology segment. Thank you, Megan, for all of that. Again, sponsored by yourcontractshop.com. Thank you, Megan. Thank you to Scott. Thank you to Dick and all of our listeners. You can find us at thinkamericaradio.com for our podcast. Find me, Terry Talk Radio, on Facebook. And remember, think America, reason first, and then converse. We'll see you next time. Do you like the stranger danger advice, or are there unintended consequences for kids? We'll talk about that on the program. Tariffs and the tariff war. It seems to be a situation of one-upsmanship. We'll discuss this as well vis-a-vis China. And the city of Houston faced this issue when city inspectors found a sex doll brothel was set to open there. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg, your host of America's Radio Town Hall. Nice to have you with us across the land. Every week, I invite two real Americans to come and chew with me, let their hair down on interesting topics that often don't make the headlines, thought-provoking conversation starters. We welcome you to the show, and we welcome two everyday Americans to the show as well. Today, there is Dick. He is a retired former pilot. Hello, Dick. Nice to have you.
Good to be here.
And Scott is with us. He is an insurance fraud investigator. Nice to have you, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
All right, here we go with this edition of Think America. Reason first, then converse. You guys ready?
Let's go.
Ready.
All right. Let's try this new angle on the last 2.5 weeks that the nation has been looking at the Kavanaugh chaos. The decision that Kavanaugh made it to the Supreme Court. Some on the left say this was terrible. Others on the right say it was fabulous. But it may have cost businesses $9 billion so far. Yes, believe it or not, according to CNBC, The nation was glued to the roller coaster effect for both sides, looking at it sort of like a team Kavanaugh or anti-team Kavanaugh, and whether or not he would be confirmed. And in so doing, they were not looking at their work and getting their jobs done. It's estimated that 70 million people watched or read about the hearings and spent approximately 2 to 3 hours of their workday focused on the testimony of Kavanaugh and Christine Ford the day that they testified. And that wasn't the end of it. By the final vote last Saturday, many employers reported more losses. The hearings were, in my opinion, like the Clarence Thomas hearings on steroids, even with a mob at the U.S. Senate door. So if you're an employer, Dick, let me start with you. If you're an employer, when something like this hits, how would you handle your employees so to get their attention back on the job while still allowing them to understand the current events of the day, or shall I say the weeks?
Well, first of all, if I were an employer, and I was, I wouldn't let them have TVs and be listening to the radio on the job. I'd be walking around making sure they're actually doing their job. And this number from CNBC, they're about as reliable as the Clinton News Network. 70 million people? Were they really people working, or were they retired people watching, or unemployed Democrats? It's ridiculous. An employer wouldn't let them.
Well, they estimated that it was 2.3 hours of work a day, which they estimated was $1.8 billion loss per hour, totaling about $9 billion only on September 27th, Dick. So based on an hourly of about $25, maybe $25.50 per hour, maybe only 80% of the workers were at the job, were looking. They kind of do the math accordingly, maybe 74 million at work. You subtract a few million there for people that maybe weren't at work on that given day. So they're estimating about 69.5 to 70 million employees, Dick.
Well, I tell you, if I were an employer, it's their own fault. I wouldn't let this happen. It never happened where I was at. We never had TVs. We never let our employees listen to the radio. They were working. They were doing things. And we wouldn't let that happen.
But Scott, we're in the world of mass communication now. So how can it be prevented? If I text you, for example, and you're in the cubby down the hall, and you know I'm in the cubby the other end of the hall, and I text you and I say, hey, check out the Kavanaugh hearings, and you go to your device, maybe it isn't on the internet where the boss can see right there on your Mac computer, maybe a desktop computer, but you're checking your email. How do you prevent that?
Well, if I was a boss and I suspected that going on, I'd be walking around watching.
All right, Scott.
In today's society, different jobs require different attention, some jobs you're on a production line. You're working constantly, as Dick's alluding to, some of those types of jobs where you always have things going. My job is a fraud investigator. I'm on the internet surfing anyways, looking up people, trying to dig into people. I can easily click on a different tab and check something out about the case and still be productive and get my actual work done. I want to go back to the numbers a little bit. I think it's disingenuous because they're assuming that people can't multitask, and they're assuming that people are, in fact, ignoring their responsibilities and not getting their work done. All they're doing is using numbers to fit their algorithm and to fit their equation so that way they can spit out the result that they want to talk about. When, in fact, reality is these companies probably didn't lose anywhere near that amount of money. They probably didn't lose anywhere near that amount of productivity because, as you said, and as I alluded to, technology is great. We can multitask. Not every job is a production line. Not every job is working out on the farm. Not every job requires your sole attention on just that job. That's the reality of it.
Well, you make a good point. And back to the numbers and back to CNBC. CNBC in their report went to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they looked at hourly wages to come up with this particular figure. And they did math accordingly. And so it's not so much on CNBC as much as they're creating a possibility and asking the question, could it possibly be that if you start doing the math? Now, to further that, Scott, I'll go to you on this, Scott, when they also look at things like the NCAA hoops, for example, or the Super Bowl debrief on the Monday morning after, or the man on the moon, even when everybody was looking at the man on the moon. Now, this goes back, of course, or the Star Wars release. That goes back, of course, or even something like a company party. How many times are we in a company party and the company goes, okay, let's all have Halloween treats, or let's all have a Christmas Yuletide, and everybody takes a break. So relative to these other things, Scott, I'm not sure that it can be prevented, and I'm not sure it should be prevented necessarily, Scott.
Right. And I'm glad that we went to this part of the discussion, because this was my primary thought. You mean people have a problem with the American working public paying attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C.? God forbid I take some time away and pay attention to that, because guess what, boss? Without that working right, we don't work right. So, I mean, when I first heard this posed and I saw this information in this article, I thought to myself, I personally have an employee. I have an investment in real estate business that I deal with too. And I've got a couple employees at the property. And quite frankly, I encourage them to make sure they take care of themselves first. I encourage them, if they got something to deal with it. And this, to me, as an employer, this is not a big deal. If you're paying attention to Washington, D.C., good. I'm glad, because there's a whole lot of people that aren't. There's a whole lot of people that are just walking around taking whatever source they want to look at and consuming it as gospel preaching. Quite frankly, I'm really disgusted that the media took this angle. And if there's any employers who are really concerned about their people paying attention, I wouldn't want to work for that person, most likely.
Well, Dick, maybe we should pay attention, and not just some attention, maybe more attention. What many employers that were interviewed were trying to get across to their employees was to discourage inter-office debate about it. And that's the same when President Trump won. Everybody was talking about it, but let's calm down. Let's not have a major debate in the office, but nonetheless, at the same time, allow them to pay attention, Dick.
Yeah, I agree. But the thing is, the way this article, the way they did this study, I guess you want to call it, they made it sound like everybody was sitting there glued to their screens, and nothing was getting done. You can do both. Multitasking works.
Do you think more people, Dick, should be paying attention, or when everybody pays attention and they're not learned on the facts, then we can get people that just don't know how to debate. They don't know. They get caught up in groupthink. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's very true. You need to know the facts. You need to be able to think for yourself. And if you just do what you're told and you don't know what's going on, you only hear a slice here and there, you don't know what to do.
Did you watch nonstop, Dick?
I didn't watch nonstop, but then I'm retired. I've got the 3 kids to take.
Well, that's why I asked you, because you are retired.
Yeah, I watched part of it, but then when it got too crazy, I just got up and walked away when they started, when the Democrats, Feinstein especially, started harassing him and Booker got on. It was a joke. It was almost nauseating. So I just walked away and went down the street and maybe rode my bike for an hour.
Yeah. And you, Scott, did you watch it? I mean, were you pretty glued?
I was not. I knew it was going to be theatrics. I didn't buy it from the beginning. So I mostly did, some people will track sports scores on their phone. I sort of tracked Twitter and other online sources that just give bullet points of updates and things that happened. That's how I followed it.
But Scott, there were about a week where Kavanaugh was in jeopardy, and it was not looking good for those on the right, conservatives, Republicans. It was not to his advantage, especially when Senator Flake called for another delay. And then it looked as if, well, this could very well turn out not positive for Judge Kavanaugh. Scott.
As an investigator, when they went to the FBI one last time, I said checkmate, because it didn't matter who it was checkmate on. It was either going to verify the liar's comments and accusations, or it was going to exonerate Kavanaugh. And so what it did was brought the full truth out. What it did was bring an October surprise onto the Democrats that's self-inflicted. And it woke up even more of the silent majority and probably added several thousands of independents to the silent majority, if not hundreds of thousands of independents.
You know, it's also, and we're getting down here to the wrap of this segment, Dick, but what's also interesting is once the FBI did come back with their analysis, and this is an analysis for the 7th time, and said there's no there, that still wasn't good enough for Democrat senators.
Yeah, they had no intent. They didn't really care what was brought back. It was just delay. Do whatever they can to delay, and no matter what was brought back, they were going to argue about it.
Remember, before any nominee was mentioned or named, they were already saying vote no.
That's right.
Well, and that came from Democrat leadership, too. So just in summary, I like it when I see these kinds of statistics because it does point out what there is a collective, what the collective cost is to employers in general. And that was just for that day. And I also believe that Americans need to know these things. If I was an employer, I would say, all right, everybody, you go in at lunchtime and you look at the big wall screen that we have, wall TV that we have in the break room, and you can get caught up at that time. So that would be my 2 cents. All right, good discussion, guys. Kicking off this edition of Think America. You can find me, Terry Gilberg, at Facebook, Terry Talk Radio, and subscribe to our podcast at thinkamericaradio.com. Be right back. Welcome back to Think America. I'm Terry Gilberg with my 2 American Terry's Talkers here on our Town Hall, Radio Town Hall here on Think America. Switching gears now, on YouTube, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but there's a video of a man with a dog who is able to show parents at a public park that despite a lot of efforts to teach kids about stranger danger, the man, his name is Joey, but he plays the role of a stranger and tells the parents as such. He says, parents, I can get your kids on the playground, on that jungle gym, to talk to me. And I'm going to do it by way of luring them with my sidekick, which is a little dog. And so the parents say, not my kid, right? Not my kid. My kid knows about stranger danger. And he says, just watch me. So he goes over, he engages in conversation with children coming down the slide or playing in the sandbox, whatever. And not only do they engage, but Joey walks off the playground with the kid to show the kid that there are other puppies that are at the park. And the parents are rather astonished with this. So here's the question, Scott. Let me start with you. You are, you've heard the stranger danger advice. Do you believe that this is effective?
I do. However, when I saw this and then I read some other articles for and against stranger danger teachings and what have you, I came to understand that I naturally help my children overcome the negative effects of stranger danger, such as, oh my gosh, I'm scared of everything now. I simply taught stranger danger. However, it's more stranger be aware. You know, keep your distance. If they want you to come with them, don't come with them. If they try to get too close, separate yourself or back away. Now, this video is done at a park. And that's the kind of setting where I taught my kids how to handle the setting appropriately. I also didn't ignore my children. So if a stranger did start talking to them, I found my way over there real quick. So part of it's parenting. Part of it is teaching your kids how to be a healthy, functioning member of society.
Well, we talk about kids and you're a parent yourself, but we haven't addressed yet the ages of children. When I saw this, and every single time I've thought about stranger danger with regard to parents, I always kind of thought it sounds good for young kids, but for a young child, every person is kind of a stranger when they start going to go out in society. A 3-year-old doesn't really know the mailman, who's a benign, jovial guy, from somebody who wouldn't be. So I kind of think the stranger danger should go for a lot of teenage girls. Don't be talking to someone at a bar if you're coming into a situation where you're using that fake ID, right? Which you shouldn't have. In other words, should the stranger danger be for really little kids anyways? Dick, let me go to you on that. It depends on the age of the child. If the kid is 3, everybody's sort of a stranger other than mom and dad. Yeah,
I told my kids, and I still got 2 living at home, I said, when they were really young, they weren't out of my sight anyway. That was never a problem. But the older ones, now that one of them's 9, one of them's 10, one of them's 14, they can't resist puppies and kittens. And it's been long known that if you want to get a kid, show them a puppy. Say, hey, I've got a free puppy over here in my car. Come on, take a look. I'll give you one. Mm-hmm. That's been known for many, many years. But I taught the younger ones. I didn't have to teach them it because I was there with them. I never let them out of my sight when they were younger. Now, the older ones do, but I tell them if anybody ever asks you to go with them, don't say a word. Run as fast as you can to the nearest house and bang on the door, and somebody will come.
But would they understand that if they're 3 or 4 or even 5?
I wouldn't let them be out of my sight long enough to have that happen. That was always fairly close to them at the park, anywhere.
Right. But Dick, irrespective of that, do you really think this message, stranger danger, should be directed to kids who are older?
Yeah, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on. I've seen a lot of strange people around my neighborhood. And I just tell them, look, if you don't know the person, if they want to talk to you for a second, fine. But if they make any move or they say, come with me, I got something to show you, take off as fast as you can run.
Right. And I think most parents in today's world, most that I know, that when the kids are little, of course, they don't take their eyeballs off them. Oftentimes they're very, very close by. Scott, there's another angle on this I want to cover. Every single law enforcement statistic that I read, psychologists that I read, they talk about this other angle that these abductions are most likely to happen with somebody that the kid actually knows, the weird uncle, the distant aunt, the next door neighbor, the pervert that lives down the street, but you don't know he's a pervert. So there's this element of the stranger adjective, or stranger, quote, noun rather, isn't a stranger. It's he or she isn't a stranger at all. It's someone the child knows.
Yes. And that's where, I really think, and I've always taken this approach, is just simply teaching children and even teenagers and young adults to be aware of what's going on around them, to be aware of people's body language, facial expressions, how they're acting, and to also know how to create a scene if they're trying to take you, or to get away if you can get away. I mean, it's all subjective and it's all situational based. So as a parent, you have to get through everything and think through everything with your kids.
To each his own, keep your eye on your kids. All right, straight ahead, my interview with an expert on China and the tariff war we are under. I'll be right back. We're back on Think America. I'm delighted to bring to the microphone now a real China expert, Bonnie Gerard, on the issue of Chinese tariffs and the tariff war, or what I call the one-upsmanship we're experiencing. Bonnie founded the China Channel, which is the first independent consultancy providing due diligence for foreign countries coming into the Chinese market. And she's been responsible for the negotiation and implementation of over $1 billion worth of contracts in China. Plus, she's a frequent speaker on all things China and writes for The Diplomat. You can find her work at thediplomat.com. Bonnie, nice to have you on the program. I'm delighted that you said yes to come on the radio with us.
It's a pleasure and an honor, Terry, and thank you very much for the nice introduction.
All right, let's get right to it. You're welcome. Most Americans think this is a lot of one-upsmanship, a lot of bravado on the part of China and the United States, with China and tariffs, or a kind of up the bidding in a high stakes poker game. What is really going on? Would you agree with that? And when will there eventually be a truce? Because I don't see any truce coming from Donald Trump for a long time.
I don't see it so much as a game of one-upsmanship, nor do I see this as a trade war that began just this summer. This is something that has been brewing and simmering since, believe it or not, from my eyes, having gotten to China in 1987 and having spent half of my time in China ever since over the last 31 years. In my eyes, this trade war has its origins in the early 1990s, after the Chinese market really truly opened up to foreign investment after Tiananmen Square, and American and European and other international countries and companies from those countries began pouring into China, knocking down walls and trade barriers and political barriers to try to access and open and build the Chinese market. And along the way, those multinationals and even smaller companies made a lot of concessions with technologies that had been proprietary up until that point, never thinking that those technologies would be, shall we say, appropriated by China, not just by Chinese companies, but by China as a corporate entity of a country, for their own use and remanufacture and dissemination under their own terms. You know, what's happened is that China has leapfrogged, and they've also leapfrogged a lot of international standards, but they had a lot of temptation put in front of them as well. So what we have here is a clash of values. We have a clash of civilizations almost, not to be too dramatic about it, but we do. And their economic rise has been on the piggyback of our investment and our technology, but now we have to claim back what is ours.
I read an article that you wrote for The Diplomat, and it showed the Chinese view and the American view. So take us a little bit, go deeper, if you don't mind, Bonnie, and take us a little bit historically on how China has viewed American business coming in post Tiananmen Square versus how now we view them, because this might be the heart of the issue as to why we've got this tariff war. You don't like the term, but President Trump and his administration has used that term before. I think both sides want to get rich. There's that impetus to get rich. So take us through that a little bit.
Thanks, Terry. And you're absolutely right. Both sides want to get rich. And one thing that I often say when I address business and other groups is China did not open its doors to the outside world so that the outside world could get rich. It seems so obvious. They opened their doors so that they could get rich, or at least have a sustainable, strong economy and country. You're absolutely right that there's a historical basis to this, and that is China's dim view of foreign powers. And of course, they play this card for all it's worth. But it is absolutely true that European powers and the United States, certainly to a large extent, took advantage of China's weakness in the 19th and 20th centuries, set up sovereign areas inside of China, in which sovereign rule of those countries, such as the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, and others, was dominant instead of Chinese law. We had American Navy gunboats patrolling Chinese sovereign waters in the 19th and 20th centuries, which the Chinese don't forget and haven't forgotten. When I first got to China in the 80s, there was a great open hostility, which many of us felt from ordinary Chinese citizens, because they'd been taught that we were there to take advantage of them and that we had cheated them in the past. And that feeling is still there. I can assure you it's still there. You know, I speak Chinese, and so I do most of my business and have most of my personal dealings in the Chinese language. And from that perspective, I can hear the frustration, the anger, the hurt. Actually, a lot of people feel hurt when they think about what foreign countries have done to them. Now, is it exaggerated for political purposes inside of China? Absolutely. As I said, this card is played, it's taught to children from the time they're very, very young. It doesn't make it any less real that it's a real problem.
We've tried to mend the pain, the hurt, the wound. For example, so many Chinese students coming to the U.S. for schooling. For example, setting up more and more, trying to set up more and more trade. And then where we're at right now is that we complain about them stealing our technology and then selling it back to us and other nations. Plus, we've got this other issue, this computer chip issue that was hidden into a motherboard of computers that this story just broke recently. It was hidden into the motherboard of computers, into a cloud vendor, into our DOD, our Department of Defense, and maybe even the CIA. And the organization that broke the story was Bloomberg. They stand by this story. So address how hasn't the United States, for one country, tried to mend this wound, and then they come back with another irritation?
Absolutely. And I don't mean to make too much of the wound, because I think it's time for China wants to be a mature international player. We can talk about that in a minute, maybe. And so, they need to be able to take things on the chin instead of always having a chip on the shoulder. And, it's time that China, and when I talk about China, I'm not talking about the Chinese people. I'm talking about the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, because where the issues lie.
Well, speaking of chip on the shoulder, we're down to about a minute and a half. So please address this latest story on the computer chip that's hidden into the motherboards.
I don't have personal knowledge of this other than the story that broke in the news. Let me put it to you this way. Having worked in the telecoms and IT business in China with hundreds of Chinese engineers as colleagues and also as direct reports to me off and on over the last 25 years, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. But I have no direct proof that it's true.
Okay. In the last minute that we have, please address whether or not our president, who has no deadline on the tariffs, he's going to hold out. Can China hold out?
China is desperate at this point, although they won't obviously openly admit it. I don't think that the president has a deadline, and I think that Donald Trump and his administration are negotiating magnificently with the Chinese government, and not having a deadline, which is a mistake that a lot of foreign companies and countries have made in the past, is a perfect negotiating position with which to go forward.
All right, Bonnie, we need to leave it there. You're a wonderful interview. I'll ask you back. You can find her work at thediplomat.com under authors Bonnie Gerard. Thanks so much for spending some time with us on Think America. Again, our China expert, Bonnie Gerard. You can find her at The Diplomat. Scott, loved hearing from her. Love hearing what you have to say.
It was a great interview. Never forget, he who carries the biggest stick carries the most power. And never forget, don't let a Trojan horse in.
Okay. Never forget, if you know it's a Trojan horse. Okay, Dick, your response.
Well, it's obvious we fell all over ourselves trying to get access to the cheap labor and cheap goods coming in. And the Chinese sat there and said, "Oh, these people are really stupid. Why not take advantage of them? I'd have done the same thing if I were in their shoes." Now we got a president who's going to stand up to them for the first time ever. And he's doing the right thing.
Well, I don't agree that China is the victim. If they were the victim once, they're no longer the victim anymore. They want to make money just like we do. So more free trade, I say. Let's move on. Guys, here was an interesting article that came out of Houston. Houston faced this issue about sex doll brothels opening up in their city. City inspectors found one business that had a sex doll brothel set to open. And how did they find this out? Code enforcement officers found showers being installed, electrical wiring, and other fixtures, renovations in what they thought was just a mercantile business selling sex dolls. But all of a sudden now there was rooms, there was wiring, there was showers. It was starting to look more like a little mini hotel or motel. Turns out it was meant to be a sex robot brothel. Along the way, when city inspectors were surmising what was going on with all this renovation, they thought maybe it would be a strip club, but it wasn't. And then the mayor and other opponents vowed to fight a brothel, a sex robot brothel, opening up in Houston. In recent days, it got at city council, it got voted down. But the bottom line, Scott, is that the city's position is that the sex robots can in fact be sold as a business, but you cannot use one there. That's to put it politely for the air. Your response, Scott?
Well, I see a whole lot of angles to it, but and I'm not in the market for a sex doll, mind you, but just thoughts from seeing this. If I'm in the market for a sex doll, do I want to roll the dice and have somebody potentially have tried this before me? It's just, I don't know, STDs, all kinds of bad, dirty things come to mind when I think of a sex doll brothel.
Okay, well, here's what those in favor said, Dick, at the city council meetings as this was hashed out a bit. Sex robots are therapeutic. They're a great outlet, especially for violent sexual predators. They do not fuel perversion. This is a good thing. You don't have to have women involved because you've got a female doll. This gets more prostitution off the streets, et cetera, et cetera. How do you view this?
Well, it's a little too creepy for me. But the thing is,
oh, come on.
There are no live women involved, so it's not as bad as prostitution, I suppose. But like Scott said, hey, who's been at that doll before you? You never know what's going to happen. I don't get it.
Well, to Scott's point, they talk about showers. Well, I imagine someone that would be playing around with a sex doll then would want to use a shower. But who's to say that the shower wouldn't also be used to clean up the sex doll, Scott?
Exactly. I mean, the showers kind of do throw me, but people who want to be a proponent and say that sex dolls are good and therapeutic, people pleasure themselves all the time. And this is just an extension of one's hand, whether you're male or female. It's just pleasuring yourself. That's not another person. That's not somebody who gives you comfort or anything else. It's you pleasuring yourself, but this time you're using a larger tool.
Do you think, Scott, that more and more cities will be faced with this? Because I do.
Oh, yeah.
The sex robots are here to stay. They're here. They're being imported all the time. There are factories that are even here in the United States. A lot of these dolls, by the way, for the listening audience, comes from China. Speaking of China, we were just talking about China. But they're being imported quite a bit. There are factories in the United States that make them as well. And this could be something that other cities face, Scott, these brothels with sex dolls.
Absolutely. This is going to go bananas, and a lot of people are going to try to make money off of it. I'm really concerned with what it does to society as a whole and interaction with people.
What do you think, Dick? Yes or no?
I think that it's just too weird, and it's going to be like one of these science fiction movies from the future.
Let's hear what Megan has to say. Megan will be with us forthwith right after this break. She's a libertarian, so she might have a different angle. We'll be right back. We're back on Think America. Megan has joined us. Megan, as you all know, comes in and contributes to the program, does a cameo on the program because she's libertarian. She's an attorney and she's a mom. So what do you think of these sex robots that are also used in a brothel in Houston, which has now been shut down? Megan, hi.
Hi. Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, actually, because, the question is, okay, well, is this legal, right? There isn't any other person involved. Each individual person who goes in to patronize the robot brothel, they know, for one, that robot is not being harmed in any way. They know that they're of age, and there isn't anyone who's being exploited. Right. The issue then becomes, okay, well, what is this encouraging people to do? And a lot of times there's this question around, okay, well, when you have access to something like this and it's virtual reality, and I think we're going to see a lot of these scenarios popping up, Terry, as virtual reality and robotics excel. It is, okay, well, what about, for instance, in child pornography? If a child is not actually being harmed, what is the harm? Well, I believe, and again, I am not a psychologist, I'm an attorney. I believe that unfortunately what ends up happening is the more you indulge a certain behavior, and it's an addiction, right, or an illness, the worse it gets, whether it's with a human or a robot. And unfortunately, many times what they find with especially sexual violence and predator behavior is that it's never enough. Right? First, it's pornography. First, it might be something small. Then they have to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I don't think it's going to deter people from engaging in sexual violence or pedophilia. On the constitutional law side, however, I think the city of Houston has a major issue here in banning this particular type of activity and this particular type of business. Houston is notorious for not having any kind of structured zoning. They don't subscribe to Euclidean zoning, which a lot of us like. It's where you separate the suburbs from industrial use and from commercial. They don't have that in downtown Houston. So if I were an attorney and I were representing this brothel, I would go after them on a constitutional basis, saying that you have specifically targeted this type of business because of its morality, because you don't feel comfortable with it. Remember that the government's job and what they're actually able to do is to protect the public. They don't get to legislate morality. Now, they're afforded a substantial amount of deference when it comes to passing these kinds of laws. So they might end up prevailing. But I think that they do have an issue specifically targeting this type of business, considering that it's going to be very hard, Terry, to prove that this is harming the public.
Well, but then you just talked out of the other side of your mouth with regard to repetitive behavior over and over and over again, whether it's looking at pornography or having sex with a sex doll. The more and more and more this is done, it doesn't prevent violence. So the city of Houston will argue what you just argued prior to the whole zoning argument.
Right. But they're going to have to actually have evidence of that. And that is where the problem comes up is this is so new. They're not going to be able to prove that people who engage in sex with robots are violent offenders. So that's where they're going to be facing that issue as far as, okay, well, let's prove that this is a problem for our city and we're protecting our citizens.
Well, they did lose on this about 4 or 5 days ago, a little bit more than that now. Sometime during the Kavanaugh hearings and all of that, we didn't get a lot of word on it until I discovered through the city of Houston when they sent me an email on it that, yes, they did prevail and it will now be closed down. So as we go into, as we move along, yes or no, do you think more of these will pop up? And then we'll go to Change Your Life Technology.
100% definitely.
I agree. What you got on board?
Well, last year alone, pneumonia claimed the lives of 920,000 children under the age of 5 around the world, Terry. And one doctor, Dr. Gilberg, out of Bangladesh, actually, after witnessing 3 children die in one night, invented an insanely cheap breathing device for $1.25 that treats childhood pneumonia and can be used around the world. So this is huge for all of these, especially malnourished children in third world countries.
And the device is called what? Is there a name for it?
This one is a breathing. It's like a CPAP, and it's actually called. Let me see if I can find the name of it on here. They actually don't have the name on it here. But the name of the doctor is Dr. Mohammed Jobair Kisti, and he's out of Bangladesh.
And Kisty, if people want to look it up?
Chisti.
Chisti. Very good. Thanks for that. We appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Megan, for being on the program. As always, we need to wrap up this edition. You can find me at Terry Talk Radio on Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast, thinkamericaradio.com. Thank you also to Terry's Town Hall talkers, Scott, and to Dick. Until next time, reason first and then converse.